now this building we're looking at here obviously is the smokehouse.
Yeah.
And you have two very strong architectural elements that show you that. Whenever you're passing through Grand Manan, you'll see the sliding doors and that chimney vented roof at the top of it. So whenever you go around Grand Manan, you'll be confused sometimes because you'll see the sliding doors, but you won't see the vented roof because the buildings have been converted and no longer used as smoke sheds, so people knock the tip off and close the roofs off. This is one of the few remaining on the island that's actually in good shape and will remain in good shape for quite a long time. Because on a day like today, if we're smoking on a day like today, which is nice and dry out, we'd leave those windows wide open because the sun and the dry air is helping us dry the fish. If it's a moist day or a foggy day, which often happens here, we want to close those doors right up. This whole building is designed around this stick, right? This stick's 39 inches long, and it really dictates the design of the building. See the way the sticks are hanging in the bays? Yeah. So that, depending on how many bays you have, it's really this that the architect works with. Once you give him this, then he knows what the rest has to be. But this particular section here that has no nets on it, no netting on it, this is an older weir. So this weir is coming from the times of the first peoples here, or the native peoples here. When the settlers first came from Europe, they found these weirs here already in existence. People were already fishing it like this for hundreds of years. Okay. Now the only thing that this is not showing, the bottom parts of this would still have the branches of the trees on it. And it's those branches that would sort of hold in the fish. And they would empty them pretty much at night because daylight the fish could see through them a little easier and get out. Right. Although nowadays in weirs you're only seeing people fish for herring, even though other fish go in there. So this is the native trap, and it's hundreds of years older than what is used today. Now here we have the fence, right? And you always see those on the weirs. It almost comes close to the shore. Some places it comes just about onto the rocks of the shore. Let's say the fish are swimming, they're in their current, and they see the fence, and then they turn. They go into the open door of the weir. Now they're inside. As soon as the fish sort of sense that confinement, they want to escape. Okay. So what they do, what the fish does, the small fish, is when it senses that something's up, something's not right, it dives and it starts to go for deeper water. Okay. Deeper water enhances its chances for survival against predators. And you know why, right? Because the volume of water is just so much greater. Okay. So once it's in there, now we're getting to the part of the story that you were talking about. Once it's in there and it can't get its way out, it can't find its way out, then look at the shape of the weir. If you run along the outside of the weir, it's exactly what you were saying, huh? That figure-8 motion, there it goes, right? So that's what the fish sort of are doing. And they don't try to necessarily escape out the door that they came in, because that's the shallowest part of the weir. So the instinct of the fish is to stay deep. So it's not looking to come towards the surface, run out of water, so to speak, have less water to be in, to try to get out the way they came in. Now, of course, the other fishes, sometimes if you've been looking at weirs, sometimes you see seals in there, or goodness, there's all kinds of other fish that go in there. Sometimes they'll even have giant bluefin tunas, which they have to let free because they're not allowed to keep them or hunt them here and slaughter them. Last year, I was out on a weir at Bradford Cove, and there was a big mako shark in there. Oh, wow. So they had to clear that mako shark out because part of the process involves a scuba diver. He's the one that bumped into the mako down below. And he wasn't even frightened. I would have jumped right out of the water. I think I would have been on the boat and said, let's go home. That's the end of this career. Right? But he got right back in the water with it. And, all right, now we're going to talk. So the fish are in. We have them in there. Let's imagine we have a bunch of fish in there. Okay? We have some choices we can make. we can close the gate, right? That would be one choice, and start to get that purse seining set up to pick the fish up. We have another choice to make, and that is what recently I did with my neighbor. We're going to take what they call sweeping. So we're going to sweep the fish here with a net all the way to this section. We're going to keep that seine here. Connect part of it from here, one end here, to the part of it here. We still have plenty left. We're going to circle the rest of this weir. We're going to call this now the pound. Okay? But once we have it from here to here, the door's still open. So while we have our fish trapped here, we could still be fishing the weir on this section. All right? So while we're collecting our fish here to go to market, we're already getting new guys coming in here. Okay?
That's cool.
Right? It's pretty cool, right? So now we're across here and we take a look. This is some of the advantages of weir. I'm sort of very interested in this weir stuff because let's say the giant bluefin tuna go in there. They're alive. Right? We're not allowed to catch them. We let them back out. We get them back out. We push them out somehow. If the whale goes in there, we sometimes even have to break parts of the weir open to let them figure a way to get them back out. So we're not depleting, we're not wasting the resource. And that's what I meant. If we could employ this a little bit more in the future of fishing and other kinds of techniques, this is a great thing to do. Now also it gives you the highest quality fish that you can imagine. Because let's say we have those fish in there and somebody says at the Connors over here in Blacks Harbor, we want some sardines. What do you got in there? What kind of fish you got in there? And we say, well, 6/8, meaning when they go into a can, they would look like 6 fish to 8 fish in a sardine can, which is a nice size. You know, it's a pretty good quality size for sardines. So they said, okay, great. Well, we want those. Bring those fish over. Bring those herring over. So well, you might say, well, how do the herring look? You say, well, they're full of feed, meaning they just ate and their bellies are all exploded, and they have half-digested food in their bellies. Now, do we want to have to work with little fingers trying to clean those fish, or would we rather leave those fish there? And plus, we're going to squish them on top of each other. Their bellies are going to explode from all and it's going to be pretty nasty and messy and a gooey, kind of gooky, half-digested. You get a couple of tons of half-digested, stomach contents. You'd rather not. If you can avoid it, you'd rather not, right? Yeah. All right, so we can avoid it. We're weir fishermen. We can avoid it. We let those fish sit there in the pen for a day. They're going to excrete that, right? They're going to empty the contents. And now when everybody's belly, all of these fish's bellies are down to nothing, really cleaned out, then we'll harvest them. Then we'll send them over to the sardine factory. Pretty smart, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we said we have a lot of fish. Now we want to get them out of there. Back to your question here. So now we have this, what we're going to do with the bottom of this net is think of this as a curtain. And think of it as a shower curtain, right? The way a shower curtain hangs on hooks. But now we're going to take it and with that shower curtain, we're going to flip it upside down. So the hooks are on the bottom. And so the hooks are on the bottom of this, and then we're going to go from pole to pole to pole, and we're going to tie a new section of that curtain all around. This is where the scuba diver comes in. He goes down below and goes right through the rings. Okay, goes right through those rings with his line. And now we're getting to what you were talking about. If we pulled on that,
pull it all together.
Pulls it all together, and now you have a bottom. You have a closed bottom net. Now, if you're able to take that and bring it on board the back of the boat over the boom and start to slowly raise that, you're lifting the bottom of the net up. Okay, and then the fish are being pushed to one side of it. Now, you could even do that further in what they call cut the seine. So you're not really cutting the seine. What you're doing is cutting a section of it to do that same thing, just with a little piece of it, because you have so many fish in there. Now you have another boat that's going to be outside. And what's going to happen now, he has like a giant vacuum cleaner on his boat. It's a big tube, and it's maybe 20 or 30 feet long. And they're going to bring that over here and suck the fish right out of this net as we bring them to the top. They just get vacuumed right out and put on the carrier. And in the process, as they get put on the carrier, they go through this sort of tube like a water slide with some rough bottoms and some screens in it that pushes the scales off the fish. At the same time, and the scales are collected. Now they go into a scale bag. Before they used to have scale baskets. The Passamaquoddy is handmade, and then they were plastic ones. We have the scales coming off the fish, and we have a load of fish, and now they're coming to Seal Cove to our herring stand here. Let's go outside. fish off the boat and onto land. As we do that, the scales are being removed, and they're going into, nowadays, a large-scale bag. We want to get the scales off and save them because we sell them. Scales last year in Eastport were bringing $1.08 to $1.11 for 1 pound, while the fish were only bringing 8 cents. Let's go back to that fish swimming, that herring swimming around. That herring, in effect, is luring its predators to it. Huh? That shine and that glitter, that pearlescence in the water, just luring. So all those hake and those haddock, the pollock, the cod, all of those fish, they see that and they just can't help themselves. They're right on it. They're attacking it.
That's just like a fishing lure, right?
Yeah, just like a fishing lure. So in a way, that same luring effect is what the scales are really all about in terms of the sail. I'll give you an example of it. If you take a little smell.
Oh my. I recognize that.
Now who recognizes that smell?
Fingernail.
Yeah.
And so what's going on here? Why do women wear fingernail?
To lure.
It's still an attraction.
And it's working.
It's still the attraction. By the way, it was also used in lipstick.
Yeah.
It was used in eyeliners. It was used in costume jewelry. It was used in specialty paints that men put on their motorcycles or sports cars. It's that pearlescence, which actually, if you took the individual scale, it's not really the scale. If you put the scale between your fingers and you sort of pushed your thumb over your finger, it would separate, and you'd have the pearl, and that's what it is. It's that separate. Wow. It's that pearlescence.
I did not know that.
Even like, let's say you go to the supermarket, and sometimes we stare at that shampoo. There's like 15 shampoos, or in the pharmacy, and you're looking at them. You know which one to buy, except maybe the less expensive or the biggest one. But it's often that pearlescence, sort of floating in the middle of the bottle. It attracts your eyes. So this old herring is still doing its, even dead, it's still doing its job of luring us. And here we are at the top of the food chain. Yeah. We always think of ourselves a little high and mighty as being at the height of the food chain. But as a friend of mine said, we're so smart that we're the only creatures on the face of the earth that have figured out a way to pay rent and taxes. The second reason we want the scale off the fish is the scales are nature's way to protect the fish from the salt environment. Okay, so we get the scales off, and now we could brine them. So let's go in and take a look at a brine tank. So here we are in a brine tank. The building that would have been used for this had about 10 of these in it. What you would do here is you would try to keep up what they call a 60% salinity. So folklorically, you might say something like enough salt in the water to float an egg. Gets you, if you were looking at it on a hydrometer, or here they call it a picometer, that would pretty much get you to 60%, which is different than 100%, which would be
a salt block, wouldn't it?
What is it?
A salt block.
Just about. At 100%, salt will not dissolve in water. You get to the point where no matter how much you stir it or boil it, it's not going anywhere. And they would use that for kippers, but for much shorter periods of time, maybe 15 seconds in that kind of solution before they smoke it. Corned beef, certain kind of meats get exposed to 100% brine for a while. But this got 60%, but instead of 15 seconds, these little fish would be sitting in here for 2 or 3 days. So it's very important to get the salt content right deep down into the bone. That's important for later when we're drying through our smoking process, and we have this product that's going to go around the world. We don't want it to be able to get maggots or bacteria. And remember, no refrigeration. So that's the big key here. That we're able to sell protein throughout the world without refrigeration. That was a kind of neat thing to be able to do.
Yeah. So would the cod be the same process?
It was different. Well, those hard cod that you almost feel like you could play baseball with, that was salt cod. It didn't go through the smoking process. Okay? It was just made to totally eliminate the moisture. And then they have a product that was softer, like a Finnan Haddie kind of product. But that needed more refrigeration. That was meant to be eaten more quickly.
Yeah.
All right, so from here, after 2 or 3 days, the brine master, and he was a master. It was an important job because that salinity changed constantly. Because as the fish were taking in the salt, the salinity of the water would change and it would become not salty enough, not brine enough. So he had to keep that up. Otherwise, the fish would get mushy and you'd have to throw out the lot.
So would they just bring in salt water from the?
Well, they brought salt is one of the few things that they imported, and not because they couldn't make it here. They knew how to make it. The native peoples would have been making it for centuries, and the early settlers did as well by evaporative process. But it was so much easier since they had boatloads of the finished product going to the Caribbean. It was so much easier to fill the holes with salt on the way back. Because salt in the Caribbean, you have the hot sun on these little bayous during the day, so the salt just collected. So the tide would go down a bit and you just shovel it. I mean, it's a much easier process. You're not burning down half your forest to start boiling kettles of seawater to, that sort of way to get salt. So it was just advantageous to do it that way. And they bring up sugar, I guess, for their own table use and things like that. And of course, when they were always talking about that mercantile trade of sugar being moved all over the world to the mother country and all of that, a lot of that sugar came in the form of rum. They don't tell you that so much in the history classes in grammar school and high school, but that was one of the ways that sugar got transported. Okay, so now the brine master says, we're done. It's all brined up. Now we scoop in, take our fish, and it would usually go through a hole in the wall, just like this one in front of us. People would be calling for fish, and you'd be dumping fish in front of the stringer stations. Now you might have a stringer station with 8 or 10 people here. And these are the stringer stakes. So we'd be going through the gill and out the mouth, through the gill and out the mouth, through the gill and out the mouth, with some speed. I mean, it would almost look like an old Keystone Cop, those old movies where people, moving real quickly. So, and then you get about 16 or 18 fish on each one of these. And as soon as you get one done, which in the 1950s you'd be getting a penny for, in the 1960s about 2 cents, and you'd put it on a herring cart, which is we have through the wall here. You see it?
Yeah.
It'd all be stacked, huh? So you'd have that all filled with fish. And it sounds like people were being paid nothing for this at a penny a stick or 2 cents a stick. But in reality, there was an older woman who was retired from Toronto 2 years ago who came, and we looked at some of the paperwork. And she realized that by the end of the day, in seeing what the take-home pay was, it was about the same as what she made. She was a teacher in Toronto. So it wasn't that it was underpaid. It was cold and it was hard. And you're standing up with 15 pounds of fish in your hand all the time. But it was a decent living. And the whole island was employed. Maybe I should mention at this point, Grand Manan, in its heyday, produced 80% of the world's supply of smoked herring. This little island. It's amazing when you consider that people were doing it up and down the coast, Nova Scotia, all over the place, Maine, all over the place. And this one little island, 80% of the world's supply. They had years where they put out 1 million boxes. The boxes would either be 10-pound boxes or 18-pound boxes. It's a lot of fish, each being handled individually several times during this process. This is a labor-intensive business. Okay, so now we have them. We've loaded them on our herring horse. Scale baskets. Those are baskets for the scale. We call them scale baskets. They were made by the Passamaquoddy Indians. They're pretty old at this point. All right, so now we have to take the fish off of the herring horse, and people would straddle here and climb up. And we hand them up, usually 2 sticks at a time, going up, 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 and getting ourselves ready for smoking. If you just had enough fish to get yourself a bay, then you'd start the fires. To start to smoke. Naturally, you don't have any fire going as you're doing this process of loading the billy. You don't want to be working in that kind of smoke. But if we did have this pretty filled up, and that would happen quite often, we'd set up about 12 fires. And the wood would be set up in this sort of position, this kind of deal, like this. And they would oil the tips, and then they'd throw a bunch of sawdust, a big mound of sawdust all around it. So the idea is you have no heat. If you had your hand here, you wouldn't feel any heat. Because this is cold smoking. You want to have this cold smoke. All right?
What kind of oil? Just like an oil?
Well, they would really use things like kerosene or whatever they can get to get that thing lit up, which is not a great idea. When I do it here, I'm always trying to figure out a way to make a fire outside and then bring the fire inside. But they come with the, I got oil, Tony, and stick it up and say, yeah, okay, great. Put these sticks in a fireplace. They burn up in 20 minutes. But if you cover them with sawdust and this process is going right, you could get 12 hours, 15 hours out of those same pieces of wood. just smolders. There's no flame whatsoever. It's just this red glow, and it just works its way back. And you have to come in and keep putting sawdust on it. But it's really pretty amazing how long you can keep fires going. So when the industry first started, people collected driftwood. But then once we got into the amount of fish that was being smoked, they would cut down the wood that they had and just have big logs and work it like that. I described some of the architectural elements of this big smokehouse, right? Look at this little miniature here. We have the vented roof, and we have the sliding doors. And inside, we have the open fish smoking away. And as you can see, by the way, when at the bottom there, you don't see any flames, or you didn't feel any surge of heat popping out of this smokehouse. But no flame, as you can see. Because the process is called cold smoking. This is a cold smoke. You can hot smoke as well, but this is cold smoking. This is for preservation. And see the fish starting to wrinkle and dry here that way? And this one not nearly as much. This one's much softer. And you can see some differentiation there for those as well. And then that actually I hung those up in today's tours. But you can see some of them are pretty well dried there in the middle. And you can see the heads are certainly totally dried out. Huh? Now, if we were smoking a salmon or a trout, or what was the one that you said you liked?
Blowfish.
Blowfish. Well, I'm really not so sure on the blowfish smoking. But if we were doing it, like I said, it would be a much shorter period of time.
Yeah.
And when I do a big side of salmon, I salt for a while, dry salt, clean it off, then I dry sugar, then I air dry, and then the actual smoking process for a big side of salmon, for me, is 3 or 4 hours. It's finished, and then I air dry some more. And then you usually seal it as best you can, and then you put it in a refrigerator. See, that's the difference. This fish we're not going to put in the refrigerator to keep it from going bad, right? So we're going to keep this fish up here, not for 3 or 4 hours. We're going to keep this fish here for 6 to 8 weeks. So it's a much different process. We're really not talking about smoking in the way that we think about smoking and taste. We're talking about drying. Okay, that's really what we're doing. We're drying right down to the bone. Okay, so 6 to 8 weeks up there. Now you notice we haven't cut any heads off or tails or gutted or anything. They're smoking away as whole fish. After 6 to 8 weeks, we've established that they're really dry, and now we can start bringing them down. Some of them will be directly put into big boxes like the kind that you see over there. And then most of those bloaters heading to places like the American South and the Caribbean. The other finer product, which would be the boning, which would take place upstairs in the next shed, because it's a more sterile environment, hygienic environment. You don't want to be doing that on a gravel floor. The gravel floor is great for the fire and the smoke, but not for the processing of the fillets. So those bloaters would end up in parts of the world where, if you think about what's going on in 1830, 1840 in the Caribbean and in the American South, right? We have slavery. And then after slavery, with emancipation, you still have people doing the same work. I mean, you still have to pick the cotton, and you still have to cut the sugar cane. This was a perfect food for those workers or the slaves before them. Because what do you need if you're working out in the heat and hard? You need salt, and you need protein. And you didn't want to kill your slave, because many people don't realize how valuable a slave was. Well, I was doing research for this project. Sometimes I got interested in, well, what was going on with the people at the other end of this product, not just what's happening here in making the product. And so it came across something, I wish I could tell you the exact year, but I think it was about 1829. It was a slave sale. And they described a breeding stock, Negro, and they give the man's measurements like an animal stock or English measurements by stones in the hands, and that's the way they describe him. But the price tag is what threw me, that I had $1,000. $1,000 for a slave. I mean, it just went against my thinking, because I just thought of it as like a lower form of life, the way people would treat it, and I didn't realize that it had this dollar tag to the more expensive of the slave trade. And I thought that amount of money would translate to something like $175,000 in today's money, which would be the price of a very expensive piece of farm machinery. And I guess that's the way they thought of those people, as very expensive pieces of farm machinery. Okay, and you didn't want that person you didn't want to kill that person. They were jarred goods and they were canned goods. But if you ate that, there was the danger of dying because of botulism and bacterial infections, and people didn't understand or want to understand the whole concept of germs. So that, there's sort of witchcraft and devil stuff and God's punishment, or all different kinds of things that went on with this whole concept of germs. There are still people who don't want to believe in, germs. That germs are a part of a reality, of everyday reality. So this was a great food to keep these workers alive and safe. In those same magazines, by the way, you might see in a different section an ad for a mail-order bride. So basically, white women coming from Europe to go with the pioneers out west, or wherever. What do you think it costs for a mail-order bride in the same era? $10, $15, $20. It's kind of ironic. The difference in the value. Once again, had all to do with value. Yeah. One person's a slave, one person's free, yeah. But this value thing had a whole other sense to it. Now, much of the other fish, was more labor intensive. Now we're going to bring the rest of the fish down, and we're going to bone it. This is more labor intensive. So we take the fish, put it back on the herring cart, and we'd be wheeling it over here to the pulley system where we have the giant sardine can. It would be sent up to the second floor, and that's, once again, it's a much more sterile environment. Now, for the purpose of the demonstration, I have it set up here. And here there's a little sort of saying snip, snip, slit, and wiggle. So the snip, snip, you have two tools, a scissor and a knife. So the snip, snip is you're cutting the head, and you're cutting the tail, and you're slitting the belly. And then you wiggle, because now it's so dry that the backbone gets loose. So your choice of whether you want to use your knife or the back of the scissor, people did it differently, to get that bone out of there and then to get the skin off, and then put the fillets in these little boxes, or bigger boxes. And since we made the boxes here, if the fish were longer or shorter, we could accommodate that. For shipping purposes, the fillets would be sent out in 10-pound packages, and the bloaters 18-pound packages, to all over the world. You probably go back further in history to precede this business, and there was already businesses going on with salt cod. You were talking about salt cod before. So the all new thinking about the history of those eras, they're thinking now that these people from Spain, northern Spain, they believe that the Basques were able to maintain a secret traveling route to this part of the world, to the Maritimes, and were able to catch cod here and set up summer places where they could dry it on rocks and hang it and do different things, and then bring it back to Europe. And then the English and the French are all saying, where is all this fish coming from? These Basques seem to have they always seem to have a good product, and they always seem to have fish, And it seems that the thinking now is that for several hundred years, the Basque fishermen kept that information to themselves, and they were coming over here. So that you had the beginnings of this European getting used to smoke different kinds of fish, processed protein that's been stabilized, let's use that word, for times of famine. Because that's always been the age-old thing, huh? What do? We have this bountiful situation, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and now we're starving to death. So that early the Basques was solving part of that protein problem for Europeans with a different food stuff.
And when was that now? Was that like...
Well, the new thinking is that it could have been as before even Leif Erikson. There's an interesting writer. He wrote a book called Cod, and then he followed it up with a book called Salt. Kurlansky is his name, and they're actually wonderful books. And there's something else I like to point out to people. The people here, the people who grew up here and made this industry happen, and their descendants who are friends of mine now, all of the people here, we have the Ingalls, Junior Ingalls, one of the man who put together the Ware with his granddaughter, and Fisher Green, they sort of think of artists as like a frivolous lot. They tolerate us, but they would never consider themselves to be artists. And I tell them, now Fisher, take a look at this wheel. Look at the color. This goes well beyond function. You know, you didn't really have to get this ornate with the design, and you certainly didn't with the painting, with the colors of the paint. You know, so I say, you guys are really artists, you just don't want to admit it. Now, how about this net? That's an interesting net. So once again, we're going back to early ware fishing now when we talk about this net. If you look inside this net, you'll see a rope. See that rope swinging there?
Yeah.
That was attached to the bottom here. So then you could pull up from the bottom and just sort of slide those fish in, and you'd fill up the whole boat. You're sitting with fish all around you now.
Yeah.
You know, but the wares, if you notice around Grand Manan, are all fairly close to shore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like great distances, but the fishermen with that type of fishing, as well as the dulcers today, if you watch the dulcers, they really fill those boats up to about, you know, if you put like a bowling ball in there, you're going down. You know, when they fill it up to the max, sometimes really take a chance. You get a little dangerous trying to maximize that one tide, you know. But they do it. The other interesting thing about this net, you know, before 1937, well, everything that in the maritime industry, fishing industry, anything to do with boats, you needed rope and you needed nets and you needed lines. It was all made out of natural fibers. So it was made out of either sisal or cotton or hemp. So those three products pretty much took care of most of the rope making. This one happens to be cotton. So what that meant is if you would introduce any of those materials into salt water, they wouldn't last very long at all. They'd break probably on the first or second day that you're using them. So that meant you had to take that string before you started doing anything with it and tar it. So you'd have to treat it, either oil it or tar it, every single line on every single boat. I mean, it's just mind-boggling when you think of it, that labor intensity. Things changed after 1937 because DuPont got the patent for synthetics. And it changed the world. It was one of those sort of earth-shattering, just in time for World War II. So DuPont was, there's a little town in Mexico, Merida, on the Yucatan Peninsula, which at one time boasted more millionaires than any other city in the world. So, but after 1937, those millionaires either hit rock bottom or they invested their money in DuPont Corporation. As refrigeration comes in, the smoked herring industry goes out. How many people were on the island? I couldn't really say. I think there's about 2,700 now, but that's no indication, I mean, of what it actually was. I really don't know what the I should know. I read Eric Allaby's book. I'm sure it's contained in that. But I don't know. Anybody else know what the population was in the 1880s? Or?
I think it's been pretty consistent.
Pretty consistent around 2,000, 2,500, between 2,000 and 3,000.
So would like children be doing this kind of work?
Yes, children, everybody that's over 30 years on this island now that you bump into and talk to, you can pretty much guarantee they did something in this industry. Have you seen a sardine can selection yet?
No.
Come on, let's take a walk. One more little thing.
$1.
Yeah. Okay.
$1.19.
So now,
99 cents.
Yep. Now, when you open that can,
Mm.
how many fish are you usually looking at?
Oh, it depends. Sometimes they're bigger and sometimes they're smaller.
I would guess
Mm-hmm.
that when you're paying more, there's more fish. Smaller fish, more quantity of smaller fish.
Mm.
And that sometimes you'll see sardines 99 cents in a can or 89 cents and then $2.69 and then $3.59.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can get exotic and get to, so that, I'll stop there for a second. So if you get to things like this, millionaires and billionaires, you start getting to the point where you have 15 and even 20 and even 22 fish in one can. This one has about 22 fish in one can. These are from Norway, millionaires and billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot more work. If you're taking, for instance, here we have a sardine can. Now, when you get what's in there, somebody in the factory is going to clip it here and clip it here, or let's say like that, and then only this back half goes in that can, fits in that can. Okay, and that's what you're looking at, and they reverse it. So it takes 2 seconds for somebody who's really good with their hands to get that in the can. Now, if somebody has to do this and get tail and then head to tail and mix them, and then a second layer and clean them and set them in there. You know how nicely they sometimes they don't just fall in there that way. Somebody placed them in that. Somebody packed them who really knows what they're doing. That might take them 10 minutes to set that can up, and this one took them 5 seconds. That's why $4.99 and $69 or $89 or $1.05.
So they do pack it by hand.
They do pack them. They do pack by. Yeah, that's right. It's being packed by. Then you get to the exotic world of some of the brand like these. I don't know if anybody speaks French, but these are sardines from the Brittany coast. And now fish, a shellfish, whether it's an oyster or whether it's a fish, when you take the same fish or the same subspecies of fish and you put it in a different water environment, it eats something different, and the water and the minerals in the water affect the taste. For some reason, in Brittany, they really do, in my opinion, come up with a fish that tastes a little, for my taste, it's really terrific. It's really just a great product. As you can see, these cans are mostly empty. We keep the fronts, but some of the 69, your fish cakes are still whole. but we've gone through a lot of these, a lot of these more exotic. And then you go to even a nice French restaurant, and you could even be served in a nice restaurant sardines in the can on a plate with tablecloths and a knife. And usually, if that's the case, it might be one of these rodelles. These are probably the most expensive of these, the museums of what we show here. But I believe they're just a Breton.
So when the industry was first happening, they would do it in boxes in the 1830s.
Oh, the boxes would, let's not confuse it. The sardine is one industry, and the can, totally different from the smoked industry. Those are two different kinds of, two different Megillas.
But there was a time when there wasn't canning, so I was curious.
That's right. Well, there was canning, but it was a more dangerous reality because people didn't understand the germ, and it wasn't a big business. To this day, there's someone on the island who is my expert on cans. He knows more about a can than anybody, than you might imagine. Each one of these cans has a reference. Every can here, they know, when they look at this can, what machine it was made on, whether it was the morning shift or the night shift or the afternoon shift, if there were 3 shifts, and where it was produced, at what factory it was produced. That's a can of tomatoes that you get off the shelf. Anything that you see canned, then sometimes you see this indentation. You ever notice these letters and numbers? That's what's telling a canned reader what it is. So if you sue some company and you tell them that can of sardines was the cause of the problem, when you go to court, the sardine company comes and says, well, we happen to have a can from that machine, packed on that day, exactly in line right next to your can. So we give this can to the court, and let's see if that, whatever it was that was you're claiming was in that can is in this can. If it was, in fact, messed up, then they're guilty. And if it wasn't, then they're going to walk. They're going to beat that case. Now this French one, I don't speak French, but does anyone?
A little bit.
Okay, because if you read the can, it would tell you that this can is good. I think it was produced in 2000 is when they canned it, but they said don't eat it until at least 2002. Turn the can periodically, and it would be best eaten in 2010. As you can see, it's empty here, and it's only 2006, and it's been empty for several years. Excuse me?
You couldn't wait.
I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait for the max. No, all of them got eaten. And they really are delicious. They really are delicious. So a sardine is not a sardine. Is not a sardine. They're really pretty amazing. I love them. I've grown to like them. I never really liked them as a kid or anything, but whatever you can help us with, we appreciate. And if you're a little short, you can jiggle and you can take some money out of here. All right, and we'll work it that way. All right, but it's nice talking with you. And if you like a water or a tea, I'll be happy to put something up to you if you want to. We're gonna sit down for a while and take a break.
Okay.
And if you'd like to join us, I'm right up the top of the stairs. All right. Okay.
Shda da shda ba shda ba da ba bu de shda ba da ba do dee ba 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 shda da ba de shda ba da ba shda ba da dee da ba do da shda dee da ba da shda ba ba do de ba shda da ba ba do de ba shda da da ba do ba bu de da ba do de. Live for today, best forget your sorrow. Tomorrow it's always too soon. Just live for today, there's no need to borrow. Tomorrow it's always too soon. We live, we laugh, we love, we cry. We live, we laugh, we die. Just live for today, best forget your sorrow. Tomorrow it's always too soon.